Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. Subscribe there for the upload. I will tell you in about 35 seconds, within 30 to 40 seconds, why there will be superseding indictments in addition to the conspiracy statutes, which will be all new indictments in about 3 or 4 or 5 months. The defendant emailed Mr. Richmond shortly thereafter, entitling the message "pretty good" and sending a link to a New York Times piece regarding the defendant's purported options in late October 2016 concerning the Clinton email investigation. Then he says, well done, my friend. Who knew this would be so, and then much fun. Okay. This is Comey caught in the act of celebrating the New York Times piece. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is the following. You will hear his testimony that I don't think anyone on the planet has heard to Dianne Feinstein, linking the article. So the article talks about this is the DOJ unearthed, newly discovered emails pointing to James Comey, and hit subscribe to this channel right now, celebrating a potential leak. So he allegedly celebrated a potential leak with the alleged liaison. The article itself in the New York Times is, these are the bad and worst options James Comey faced. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to lead to numerous convictions, possibly for a number of people, including Comey. And you will hear why in the testimony in a second. In 1 second, in a couple of seconds, you will hear James Comey testify and incriminate himself under oath. Here's why. The New York Times article, I'm not accusing the writers of anything, the journalists of anything, okay? But there's no way they would have known about, in an unrelated investigation, FBI agents discovered hundreds of thousands of emails on a computer belonging to the disgraced former Congressman Anthony Weiner. Several of the emails belonged to Mr. Weiner's estranged wife, Wilma Abedin, a senior Clinton aide. After a preliminary review, the agents said the emails might be relevant to the Clinton case and wanted to get a warrant to read them. I'm not saying a lie by omission. This is omitting exactly why Comey wrote the Comey letter, which points to what he told his potential liaison to tell, so what he leaked through his liaison to the New York Times to make him look good, to justify the indefensible. Here is why the New York Times article doesn't have all of the information pertaining to Comey's sworn testimony. They would not have known about Anthony Weiner. Almost certainly they would not have known were it not for a leak that Comey himself directed. Check this out.
Investigative team that had finished the investigation in July, focused on Secretary Clinton's emails, asked to meet with me. So I met with them that morning, late morning, in my conference room, and they laid out for me what they could see from the metadata on this fella Anthony Weiner's laptop that had been seized in an unrelated case. What they could see from the metadata was that there were thousands of Secretary Clinton's emails on that device, including what they thought might be the missing emails from her first 3 months as Secretary of State. We never found any emails from her first 3 months. She was using a Verizon BlackBerry then, and that's obviously very important because if there was evidence that she was acting with bad intent, that's where it would be in the first 3 months.
But they weren't there.
The absurd notion you would have secret servers that illegally transferred top secret intelligence onto them in a manner nobody knows is even possible. How do you transfer classified data onto servers outside of the United States government when the classified data emanated within secure U.S. government servers? It's impossible from a cybersecurity perspective. But Comey apparently thinks the entire planet has no functioning brain cells. And so he says, God, we were trying to find the intent. And it's like, inherent in owning servers is the intent to hide. And transferring that classified data is impossible. Let's continue.
Look, can I just finish my answer, Senator? And so they came in and said, we can see thousands of emails from the Clinton email domain, including many, many, many from the Verizon Clinton domain, BlackBerry domain. They said, we think we got to get a search warrant to go get these. And the Department of Justice agreed we had to go get a search warrant. So I agreed. I authorized them to seek a search warrant, and then I faced a choice. And I've lived my entire career by the tradition that if you can possibly avoid it, you avoid any action in the run-up to an election that might have an impact, whether it's a dog catcher election or President of the United States. But I sat there that morning, and I could not see a door labeled "No Action Here." I could see two doors, and they were both actions. One was labeled "Speak," the other was labeled "Conceal." Because here's how I thought about it. I'm not trying to talk you into this, but I want you to know my thinking. Having repeatedly told this Congress, we are done and there's nothing there, there's no case there, there's no case there, to restart in a hugely significant way, potentially finding the emails that would reflect on her intent from the beginning and not speak about it would require an act of concealment, in my view. And so I stared at Speak and Conceal. Speak would be really bad. There's an election in 11 days. Lordy, that would be really bad. Concealing, in my view, would be catastrophic. Not just to the FBI, but well beyond. And honestly, as between really bad and catastrophic, I said to my team, we've got to walk into the world of really bad. I've got to tell Congress that we're restarting this, not in some frivolous way, in a hugely significant way. And the team also told me, we cannot finish this work before the election. And then they worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information by her assistant, Huma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails.
Emails including classified information were being forwarded from Huma Abedin to Anthony Weiner. They were forwarding classified information outside of the United States government, and not one person in all of media or politics cared. This testimony is months after this article was written. How on earth did this article in November 2nd of 2016, that testimony I believe was in 2017. How did this article, and this is the conviction, ladies and gentlemen, right here. I'm not accusing the journalists of any criminal foul play, nothing. I am saying, how did this article have Comey's testimony, part of Comey's testimony, months before he testified? Maybe, almost certainly, or possibly, his liaison leaked the information because Comey leaked the information through a liaison to the New York Times. This is where the superseding indictments and the conviction for conspiracy statutes take place. In an unrelated investigation, FBI agents discovered hundreds of thousands of emails. Okay, this statement right here within the New York Times, the journalism does not state that there were classified emails. It does not explain to the reader how classified emails were being transferred illegally from secure government servers onto secret servers, or Uma's laptop to Anthony Weiner's laptop. Listen to this again, and this ties into how they were celebrating the leak to the New York Times. That's almost certainly part of the leak. There's no way that this article could be written in November of 2016 with information that the world found out in 2017 during congressional testimony. Furthermore, it's not necessarily a lie by omission. We don't know if the journalists or the Times knew there was classified data. But this is the problem with American media, or media in general around the world. They omit. It's either a lie by omission or an omission that is, good-natured or an honest omission of facts. The article does not mention the classified emails being forwarded. There's no way for the Times or any journalist or any publication to have known about Huma Abedin forwarding classified data without a leak or a source. But a source would lead back to Comey, which is a leak. But check this out again.
Hugely significant way. And the team also told me we cannot finish this work before the election. And then they worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information by her assistant, Huma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails and then called me the Saturday night before the election and said, thanks to the wizardry of our technology, we've only had to personally read 6,000. We think we can finish tomorrow morning, Sunday. And so
thanks to the wizardry of our technology. Okay. They just found out a week before the 2016 election that classified data was being forwarded outside the U.S. government from Clinton's top aide to Anthony Weiner, who then eventually served prison time. Okay, this is not normal. When the Democrats say this is not normal, they don't really know what normal and abnormal is. Let's continue.
So I met with them. And they said, we found a lot of new stuff. We did not find anything that changes our view of her intent. So we're in the same place we were in July. It hasn't changed our view. And I asked them lots of questions. And I said, okay, if that's where you are, then I also have to tell Congress that we're done. Look, this was terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election.
This was all by design. Everything that Comey and Clinton and Brennan and Clapper and everything they do is calculated, strategic, either for personal or political gain. I don't know how this helped the country. I don't know how Comey could explain how this helped the country, because there's no way that one of the most powerful men in America and the world, James Comey, in 2016, he was so powerful, he took the election away from Clinton with a letter because he found out that Huma Abedin was forwarding classified emails. Again, this is the conviction, ladies and gentlemen. The article here was written in November of 2016. We share this everywhere. The journalists, I have nothing but respect for. I don't know the journalists, but I'm sure that they were, did everything above board and were honorable and never committed a crime. I'm not accusing the journalists or the New York Times of anything. It is impossible, just using basic logic, for a November article to be written in 2016, November 2016, a couple of days before the election, that I told everyone through my writing in The Hill, the Huffington Post, Salon, other publications, that Clinton would lose. Nobody believed me. But I was one of the few voices in that election stating that Clinton would lose. You can read my writing on hagoodman.com. There is no way, and this is game, set, match. This is what prosecutors should focus on. There's no way that the article is written in November of 2016 with information on Anthony Weiner, whose laptop you have to use a hazmat suit probably to even touch. There's no way that information in November of 2016 on Anthony Weiner could have been written about were it not for a leak. And here's the email celebrating the leak. This is the OIG report here, stating that McCabe's own legal counsel, in a letter submitted by McCabe's counsel, Andrew McCabe, after reviewing the draft of this report, McCabe argues that the OIG should credit Mr. McCabe's account over Director Comey's, and complains that the report paints Director Comey as a white knight carefully guarding FBI information, while overlooking that Mr. McCabe's account is more credible for at least three key reasons. So this is yet another reason that Comey will be convicted, because McCabe himself still stands by the fact, Jake Tapper interview just the other day, I never saw him leaking information, telling other people to leak information. Well, yeah, that means that Andrew McCabe is not stating that Comey didn't tell him to leak information, but there's no way that this, in November of 2016, this article right here, which is the article that Comey put in the email, the celebration email, in an unrelated investigation, FBI agents discovered hundreds of thousands of emails. How did they find that out? Well, it was through a leak. It was through a leak, almost certainly. You can say source, but the source points directly to James Comey. Again, we'll listen to this again. And we'll get to other issues also. But there's certainly going to be superseding indictments here. If the case isn't thrown out because of potential, but the DOJ almost certainly lawfully, hired Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor, because it's almost certain that Pam Bondi knows the protocol a lot more than lawyers trying to kick the case out of court because they don't want to go through trial because they know they'll lose. But it's possible. It's possible the prosecutor. It's possible they find the prosecutor was not lawfully appointed. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen because the case with Lindsay Halligan is very different from the other cases that they point to where prosecutors were stripped of their title. But anyway, let's continue. This is the conviction, ladies and gentlemen, right here. How did the New York Times publish information about Anthony Weiner getting Uma Abedin's emails, which, by the way, the New York Times did not state they were classified? But how did they find out about the Uma Abedin Anthony Weiner debacle, which prompted Comey to write the Comey letter before Comey's testimony? If the article is written in 2016, Comey's testimony is in 2017, how did they find out? Either, quote unquote, a source or a leak through a source. Check it out.
I could see two doors, and they were both actions. One was labeled speak, the other was labeled conceal. Because here's how I thought about it. I'm not trying to talk you into this, but I want you to know my thinking. Having repeatedly told this Congress, we are done and there's nothing there, there's no case there, there's no case there, to restart in a hugely significant way, potentially finding the emails that would reflect on her intent from the beginning and not speak about it would require an act of concealment, in my view. And so I stared at speak and conceal. Speak would be really bad. There's an election in 11 days. Lordy, that would be really bad. Concealing, in my view, would be catastrophic, not just to the FBI, but well beyond. And honestly, as between really bad and catastrophic, I said to my team, we've got to walk into the world of really bad. I've got to tell Congress that we're restarting this, not in some frivolous way, in a hugely significant way. And the team also told me, we cannot finish this work before the election. And then they worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information by her assistant, Uma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails and then called me the Saturday night before the election and said, thanks to the wizardry of our technology, we've only had to personally read 6,000. I said to my team, we've got to walk.
So this is it. Listen to it again.
Into the world of really bad. I've got to tell Congress that we're restarting this, not in some frivolous way, in a hugely significant way. And the team also told me, we cannot finish this work before the election. And then they worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information.
Somehow, Clinton's emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information. Including classified information. Now, the Times does not include the classified information in this. Why do you think the article was written? Why do you think the article is favorable towards James Comey? That's where the leak is. That's what the leak is about. This wasn't public record. There was no public record. I read the rebuttals from very smart people. Oh, well, it's public record. This is public. No, it wasn't public record. It wasn't public record regarding Anthony Weiner and his and the classified emails forwarded to Anthony Weiner. This wasn't public record. But anyway, let's continue. This is the conviction right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is huge.
By her assistant, Uma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails and then called me the Saturday night before the election and said, thanks to the wizardry of our technology, we've only had to personally read 6,000. We think we can finish tomorrow morning, Sunday. And so I met with them. And they said, we found a lot of new stuff. We did not find anything that changes our view of her intent. So we're in the same place we were in July. It hasn't changed our view. And I asked them lots of questions, and I said, okay, if that's where you are, then I also have to tell Congress that we're done. Look, this was terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election.
And the theatrical performance here is the superseding indictments. This is directly linked to superseding indictments upcoming.
But honestly, it wouldn't change the decision. Everybody who disagrees with me has to come back to October 28th with me and stare at this and tell me what you would do. Would you speak or would you conceal? And I could be wrong, but we honestly made a decision between those two choices that even in hindsight, and this has been one of the world's most painful experiences, I would make the same decision. I would not conceal that on October 28th from the Congress. And I sent a letter to Congress. By the way, people forget this. I didn't make a public announcement. I sent a private letter to the chairs and the rankings of the oversight committees. I know it's a distinction without a difference in the world of leaks, but it was very important that I tell them instead.
A distinction without a difference in the world of leaks. Is he implicating himself in a leak right there under oath?
Or would you conceal? And I could be wrong, but we honestly made a decision between those two choices that even in hindsight, and this has been one of the world's most painful experiences, I would make the same decision. I would not conceal that on October 28th from the Congress. And I sent a letter.
The whole thing was a cover-up. My God, you'd have to be a complete imbecile not to realize they covered up Clinton email probe from day one. And like the guy in Game of Thrones, he wanted to be powerful. He wanted to be powerful against Trump. He wanted to be powerful against Clinton. So he said, hey, I have the goods on you. He writes the letter right before. I got the goods on you, Clinton. We know that Uma was forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner. I got the goods on you. Oh, oopsie. I tanked Clinton's election. Thank God Trump won. Thank God Trump won. I was saying he was going to win. Based on a whole bunch of things, favorability, but also so many scandals. Something like this, something outlandish like this was bound to happen. I was saying Trump was going to win. And this was completely outlandish. He's painting himself, just like Andrew McCabe's lawyers stated in the OIG, as a white knight. He's the white knight. Gosh, he did. I mean, what is he supposed to do? Not tell people about the classified data forwarded to Anthony Weiner? The whole thing was, her first 3 months of emails are missing, literally missing. He's testified to that. Special access program intelligence was literally transferred onto Clinton's emails. It's impossible to do. The whole thing was a cover-up. But that's the thing. People ate it up. They didn't. It was tribalism, the definition of tribalism. They didn't want to realize their political side was far more corrupt and insidious than President Trump, who doesn't have emails, doesn't have these scandals. They literally had to use a Steele dossier and set him up. So the Democrats ate it up. Oh my God, Comey, whoa, what? Whoa, you're such a good man. He's a Boy Scout. He's wonderful.
Letter to Congress. By the way, people forget this. I didn't make a public announcement. I sent a private letter to the chairs and the rankings of the oversight committees. I know it's a distinction without a difference in the world of leaks, but it was very important that I tell them instead of concealing. And reasonable people can disagree, but that's the reason I made that choice. And it was a hard choice. I still believe in retrospect the right choice, as painful as this has been. And I'm sorry for the long answer.
Well, let me respond. On the letter, it was just a matter of minutes before the world knew about it. Secondly,
ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe if you're new. This is the heart of the email that was uncovered. This right here, this testimony, this is within the filing from the DOJ and Pam Bondi. Okay, that the judge wanted the information. This is the heart of the testimony. This 2016, November 2016 article, this was written before Clinton lost, trying to rewrite or trying to, elevate Comey's public image These are the bad and worse options. Well, God, he faced so many bad options. I mean, in fact, there was information on Anthony Weiner, not public record. Nobody knew that Uma Abedin was sending anything to Anthony Weiner. This was not public record. Only that article could only have been written with a source or a leak. However you want to look at it. Almost certainly, I'm not accusing the journalists of anything, but if nobody knew about Uma Abedin forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner in 2016, the only time we find out is in 2017 during this testimony with Dianne Feinstein. That points directly to an almost certain leak or quote-unquote source, or a leak through a source, or a leak from Comey through a liaison viewed as a source to the Times. A leak through Comey to a source, to somebody, Richmond or whatever, whomever, viewed as a source to the New York Times. Okay? Just simply saying, well, it's a source doesn't mean that the person who gives the information hasn't leaked information.
My understanding, and staff has just said to me, that you didn't get a search warrant before making the announcement.
I think that's right. I think I authorized, and the Department of Justice agreed we were going to seek a search warrant. I actually don't see it as a meaningful distinction.
Well, it's very hard. It would have been, you took an enormous gamble. The gamble was that.
So here he has set up this elaborate lie, and she brings up the issue of a search warrant, and he's like, that has nothing to do with the lie I'm telling.
It's very hard. It would have been.
Distinction.
Well,
the Department of Justice agreed we were going to seek a search warrant. I actually don't see it as a meaningful distinction.
My understanding.
Answer.
Well, let me respond. On the letter, it was just a matter of minutes before the world knew about it. Secondly, my understanding, and staff has just said to me, that you didn't get a search warrant before making the announcement.
I think that's right. I think I authorized, and the Department of Justice agreed we were going to seek a search warrant. I actually don't see it as a meaningful distinction.
Well, it's very hard. It would have been, you took an enormous gamble. The gamble was that there was something there that would invalidate her candidacy, and there wasn't. So.
Oh, but there was. There was classified data being forwarded outside the U.S. government yet again. There absolutely was. But to Democrats, they'll vote for somebody, an empty chair. If an empty chair was the nominee, they'd vote for the empty chair. They're like AI robots, like morally superior AI robots. Nothing gets in the way of political victory. Text messages you just saw in Virginia with the most despicable text message. Anyway, let's continue.
One has to look at that action and say, did it affect the campaign? And I think most people who have looked at this say, yes, it did affect the campaign. Why would he do it? And was there any conflict among your staff? People saying do it, people saying don't?
The innocence from the senator here. God, why did you? Because there was classified data being forwarded outside of the U.S. government. My God almighty. What is that? Is that not enough to invalidate any candidacy? But apparently it's not.
Don't do it, as has been reported.
No, there was a great debate. I have a fabulous staff at all levels, and one of my junior lawyers said, should you consider that what you're about to do may help elect Donald Trump president? And I said, thank you for raising that, not for a moment, because down that path lies the death of the FBI as an independent institution in America.
Nonsense. It was the antithesis of independence when Comey was there, and he never thought, almost certainly the reason that he did that is he never thought that it would affect Clinton's ability to defeat Trump. That's why he did it. If he truly believed that Trump would be elected, he wouldn't have done it. But anyway, let's continue.
America. I can't consider for a second whose political fortunes will be affected in what way. We have to ask ourselves, what is the right thing to do? And then do that thing. I'm very proud of the way we debated it. And at the end of the day, everyone on my team agreed we have to tell Congress that we are restarting this in a hugely significant way.
Well, there's a way to do that. I don't know whether it would work or not, but certainly in a classified way, carrying out your tradition of not announcing investigations. And, I look at this exactly the opposite way you do. Everybody knew it would influence the investigation before, that there was a very large percentage of chance that it would. And yet that percentage of chance was taken, and there was no information, and the election was lost. So it seems to me that before your department does something like this, you really ought to, because Senator Leahy began to talk about other investigations, and I think this theory does not hold up when you look at other investigations.
The Secretary of State had classified data, special access program intelligence, illegally transferred onto her servers. Imagine if Trump had top secret intelligence on classified data. I mean, classified data forwarded to servers for 4 years. They would never rest.
Justice Department seeking to indict former FBI Director Jim Comey over perjury, saying that he lied to Congress during his 2020 hearing about the handling of Russia collusion investigation and who leaked information to the press. Watch this.
Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it.
So now it's not only the Wall Street Journal, it's the New York Times, likely other publications as well. That's the superseding indictment could include other publications as well.
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak.
I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Mine is the same today. He tried to circumvent a perjury trap. He's still indicted. And then now everyone defending him is saying, oh, well, he stood by his testimony. What was his testimony? Well, it wasn't clear. It's like, well, he's misleading Congress. But anyway, let's continue. Andrew McCabe stated that Comey allowed him, that he was just fine with McCabe leaking information for self-serving purposes there as well. Okay, because money from Clinton or people close to Clinton's went to McCabe. That's a whole other story. I mean, the whole thing was, everybody was working for Clinton in one way, shape, or form, not literally, but on the same political side as Hillary Clinton. The problem was, like in Comey's case, for some reason, he had to write that letter maybe to let Clinton know, like I said, that he had the goods on them as well.
Jim Comey walking a balance there and not saying too much. Devin Nunes joined me back in 2018 on Sunday Morning Futures talking about the movement of this information and whether or not it was Jim Comey who told Andrew McCabe to leak to the Wall Street Journal that Trump had colluded with Russia. Watch this.
Mr. McCabe has been recommended that he face criminal charges. Now, his lawyer, and he has a right to his lawyer has said, no, this is not true what the IG, Mr. Comey, is lying, essentially, is what Mr. McCabe is saying, that Comey did give him the right to go talk to the press. So, this all has to be fleshed out. Clearly, the IG doesn't believe, the IG believed Mr. Comey, that Comey did not give Mr. McCabe the ability to go talk to the press. Now, as it relates to Mr. Comey, you've got the added problem now that the memos that he wrote, the 7 memos that he decided to write on President Trump, never wrote memos on any of the other meetings he had with the other president or the AG or anyone else prior to this, but he kept 7 memos, 4 of those were classified. He decided to launder them to a friend who then leaked them to the New York Times. If those memos contain classified information, he purposely did that. He purposely leaked them in order to get a special counsel started after he was fired. He leaked pieces of these, so we need to figure out exactly what is it that he leaked. Who did?
So the IG found that they weren't classified, but the White House wasn't given the opportunity to decide whether or not there was classified information. So that's impossible to state that categorically that the memos that he leaked to start, it literally is on record also under oath as leaking information to start a special counsel. But the White House was not given the opportunity to say, hey, that's classified information.
Who did he give these memos to? And was it just the friend that leaked them to the New York Times, or were there others? I believe there were others. I think that these Comey memos were actually given to several people. It contained classified information. The irony is the very thing that Mr. Comey cleared Mrs. Clinton of.
A Virginia grand jury is expected to release a decision on this in the coming days. The 5-year deadline to bring charges against Comey is now approaching on Tuesday. So the DOJ is up against a statute of limitations. Joining me now is lawyer and founder of Article 3 Project and president Mike Davis. Mike, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So the crux of it and what they can come up with against Jim Comey today, 5 years later, is that he lied under oath about directing Andy McCabe to share with the press that Trump colluded with Russia. Do you think they'll be successful here?
I do think that they should seek an indictment in the Eastern District of Virginia, because this is a very serious matter. What the allegation here is that the Obama White House and his Justice Department and his intel agencies, including the FBI, made up the Russian collusion hoax to help Hillary Clinton's campaign and to hurt President Trump's campaign, and they continued this conspiracy to this day. And when the Senate Judiciary Committee was investigating this Russian collusion hoax, James Comey allegedly perjured himself and obstructed the congressional investigation. Those are very serious felonies, and so there must be accountability for this. I also think there are going to be other criminal probes on Crossfire Hurricane separate from the Eastern District of Virginia, maybe another probe looking at the broader conspiracy.
So, I mean, Mike, you know, there was a lot gone wrong with this whole operation, Crossfire Hurricane. Jim Comey pursued this investigation into investigating Trump colluding with Russia, despite the fact that there was absolutely zero evidence to actually originate an investigation in the first place. Is there criminality there? I mean, putting the lying under oath aside for a moment, is there other criminality that you can look at?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to step back and remember this is the greatest scandal in American history. When
That's
you
right.
have a president of the United States and his top aides and advisors colluding with intel agencies and law enforcement to take out their political enemy, to help their political ally to change the outcome of an election. And when they failed to do that in 2016, they continued this conspiracy to this day to take out President Trump. And so, yes, this is very serious. This is a conspiracy. This is obstruction. This is perjury. This is you can't get more serious than this when you are using intel agencies and law enforcement to rig and steal elections.
It's just unbelievable. And believe me, I understand how big this is. We all lived it together. And I reported at the time that we had no evidence of any Russia collusion. And you know, how did this investigation originate in the first place? But the idea of conspiracy, Mike, I want you to drill down on that for a moment, because when I spoke with John Ratcliffe, who was really the truth teller in all of this, between Devin Nunes and John Ratcliffe, that is the only way the public really got real information. But Ratcliffe told me recently that when you're looking at conspiracy, and it looks like that's what this was, conspiracy against Donald Trump, there is no statute of limitations. Do you agree with that?
Well, you can look at, for example, conspiracy against rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241. Joe Biden and Jack Smith and their Justice Department is very familiar with conspiracy against rights because it is one of the bogus charges that Jack Smith brought against President Trump for questioning the 2020 election. But what they did was actually a conspiracy against rights when you politicize and weaponize law enforcement and intel agencies to take out your political opponents for non-crimes. That seems like a textbook definition of conspiracy against rights. And generally, there's a 5-year statute of limitations for federal felonies, including conspiracy. But the conspiracy continues to this day. Covering up the conspiracy continues the conspiracy. Yeah. So there's no statute of limitation problem with conspiracy.
So do you expect an indictment of Jim Comey this week?
I hope so, because as the Democrats always say, nobody is above the law. So I would tell James Comey, you better lawyer up, buddy.
All right. We will.
So that was about a couple days before the indictment. Check this out.
His contributor, GW University law professor. Jonathan, I want to play part of the moment from 2017 that may be at the center of all this. Watch.
Have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
That is a lie. He thinks that's true because he used a liaison, but that is a lie.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Professor Turley, what are your thoughts after looking over this very short document that we have before us?
Well, there's a crushing irony here because the two counts involve 18 U.S.C. 1001, 18 U.S.C. 1505. The first one is the very same crime that Comey made against Michael Flynn. And Comey gave speeches delighting crowds and explaining how what he did with Flynn wasn't exactly copacetic, that he just sent a couple of guys over and basically tricked him. And ultimately, they charged him on what many of us thought was a pretty thin indictment. So there is that irony. These two counts are mirror images, it appears, that they are alleging that the false statements also constituted the obstruction. But there is the interesting aspect to this is that, as you know, Laura, it's very, very hard to make out perjury cases against particularly sophisticated players like James Comey. This is a little different because they're just focusing on one statement, and that is, did you get someone else to leak information? That's true or false. And his aide and close associate, McCabe, said that he did order him or authorize him to make such a leak. We also know that Comey later admitted that he called a friend, which I'm presuming is Columbia professor Daniel Richman, to get information to the New York Times and to the media after he was fired. So this is a rather murky situation for Comey. He was, Comey is a careful player, but he's also a bit of a rogue operator when things get tense. He went rogue with the Clinton press conference, but he particularly went rogue when he was being fired. He removed material from the FBI. The Inspector General issued a scathing report saying that he violated the FBI rules. It did not find that he leaked classified information, but that information was FBI information he should never have removed. And then he himself admitted
the White House was not given an opportunity by the Inspector General to decide what was and wasn't confident or classified. So anyway, let's continue.
admitted that he called up a friend to leak some information to the media. Now, that doesn't actually give him a pristine appearance. It suggests a foundation for this type of charge. None of us are happy about seeing political opponents charged. And so this case is going to remain controversial. The president truly despises this individual, and it appears to be a mutual feeling. But when you look at the charge itself, it is different from what some people might have thought. It's going to come down to whether Jim Comey is a leaker and a liar.
Did he or didn't he? Did he or didn't he? And did he have the willful intent, which I think going to that point, and there are two different issues here. He passed information off to his buddy at Columbia, Richmond, who was his old colleague, and then Richmond gave it to Michael Schmidt at the New York Times, and Michael Schmidt then would shape the coverage of this Russia collusion story with that information. Now, that in and of itself demonstrates what, Jonathan? That the FBI director was intimately involved in trying to guide the media to report the situation as he saw it. When that information presumably should not have been released under any circumstances.
Yeah, I'm actually not certain as to what is more unnerving for people in Washington. The fact that a political opponent of the president was indicted, which you can have legitimate concerns about, or whether more likely it's someone's being prosecuted for a leak. I mean, this city floats on a rolling sea of leaks. And, Comey and the FBI have been accused of leaking information when it serves their purpose. But this is something that occurs often in Washington. It's done with lethal effect. So I think that many people might find it even more unnerving that this is pretty much a leak prosecution. It's false statements, but it's really all about a leak.
And Jonathan, the president, I think we have the soundbite today in the Oval Office. There's a lot going on, executive orders. We had Erdogan's visit, but the president addressed this then potential indictment of James Comey. And this was Truth Social. He just actually posted this. Justice in America, one of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He's been so bad for our country for so long. It is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation. Make America great again. Well, that's President Trump. That was not what I was going to play, but that just came out, so we decided to read that off. Well, look, everyone knows President Trump has no use for James Comey, and Comey really did enormous damage to the United States and to the public's trust in the FBI. Over the years, and wanted Donald Trump in prison for something that was totally false, and has never apologized for it, has never shown any remorse for it, and said, in fact, he did everything basically, with good faith and, in his view, by the book.
Well, in fact, he wrote a book on ethical leadership that portrayed himself as sort of the ultimate model of ethical leadership. Many of us disagreed with that. I've been a critic of Comey for a long time. We have to see what evidence there still is here. There's legitimate grounds for concern for people about a political opponent. But this is a very direct and focused indictment, and somebody is lying.
It's not a sprawling indictment. It's very, very specific, which I think is a lot smarter than doing any kind of long, windy indictment. Jonathan, thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey.
So there will be more indictments. This indictment could be kicked out. It probably won't, but there will be more indictments, especially with what we talked about earlier in the segment. That article could not have been written without almost certainly could not have been written without an alleged leak.
Conversation, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo and former FBI Assistant Director, a man who knows James Comey pretty well, Chris Swecker. John, I think the question, and really perhaps the only question that matters in this entire episode, is whether or not that video, which we just heard of James Comey before Congress, before the Senate, was a lie. Was it perjury?
I think that the Justice Department has the grounds
to charge Comey, you have right there under oath, under questioning by a senator, a difference between Comey and his deputy. I believe it's Andrew McCabe is on the other side of this conversation as to whether Comey authorized McCabe to leak law enforcement information to the press. Now, I think this is the approach that the Justice Department takes to other high-profile criminals. Sometimes you can't get them for the things they really did, so you get them for violations. For example, Al Capone was prosecuted not for mafia activities, but for tax evasion. Here, Jim Comey, I think, turned out to be one of the most politicized directors of the FBI in its history. You may recall what he did in the lead up to the 2016 elections. And then the worst, I think, which you went through in your timeline, trying to entrap President Trump into an obstruction of justice charge, which led to the whole Mueller investigation over the Russia hoax, which was disproven by the Mueller investigation. And so I think what the Justice Department doing is going after Comey for this one charge, which you could see on the tape. I think that's a plausible case to bring into court. It will be up to the jury to decide whether this he said, she said case and the evidence is enough to convict Comey. But I think the reason why the department is targeting him is because of his politicization of the FBI in the years beforehand.
I think that's fair to look into the motivations and the reason, but I do think what's more important is he has been simply met with a charge, met with an indictment, and the question is directly whether or not he is guilty. Now, somebody is guilty, Chris. That much is clear. It's either Andrew McCabe or it's Jim Comey. One of the two did not tell the truth to Congress.
Yeah, well, what you said at the beginning is all true. Jim Comey, nobody's been more critical of him than I. I know how the Bureau is supposed to operate. I know how the justice system is supposed to operate. And the problem with this case is what John just outlined. Andy McCabe denied 3 times that he even leaked. Then finally they caught him in a lie, and he said, well, Jim Comey authorized this leak. The problem is you got a full Inspector General report, a very credible Inspector General who says the overwhelming evidence is that McCabe lied, and he was the liar in this case. So I think, you can bring an indictment in this case, and I think this indictment is really the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot more substantive violations that you could pull together, but this one is kind of a roll of the dice. It's a 50-50. I think the indictment is more important here than the conviction, because his own Inspector General, Trump was president at the time, declined to prosecute McCabe, but said there was overwhelming evidence that he was the one that lied.
I hear what. There is nothing more.
Crystal clear, the weaponization of this country has ended. Everything is on the table. We are investigating all the weaponization, all the wrongdoing that has happened. We are issuing subpoenas. We are looking at things around this country. People have to be held accountable. No one, Sean, is above the law.
No one's above the law, and turnabout is fair play. President Trump's DOJ setting its sights on former FBI Director James Comey, the longtime MAGA foe, now facing not one but 2 felony charges over testimony he gave to Congress nearly 5 years ago. With that, we want to bring in former Trump lawyer and former federal prosecutor Jim Trusty. Jim, I do want to share this before we sort of dive into all the nuts and bolts. I would just want to share this full screen. This is actually Don Bacon. He's a Republican from the state of Nebraska. A lot of people feel like he's a little bit maybe less conservative than they would like. Nevertheless, I want to share what he had to say and get your thoughts. He says, quote, "It is ironic that Comey was part of the lawfare against Trump, and now he's on the receiving end. Lawfare undermines any constitutional republic. This tit-for-tat and escalation weakens us." He goes on to say, it didn't start with this president, but it hasn't stopped either. Is he right in that respect, Jim?
Well, he's right to have a general reaction to the concept of lawfare. Lawfare is target first, evidence later. But I would tell you, I think there's major distinctions. I mean, the two big distinctions in terms of how President Trump was treated. Number one, when they went after President Trump, whether you're talking about New York or Georgia or Jack Smith, it was always inventive. It was always like, what is this crime they're trying to allege? They ignore, for instance, the Presidential Records Act, or the fact that every president since Reagan has had a give and take with archives about documents, but they criminalize that. And then the second part is misconduct, literally prosecutorial misconduct. I lived it when I was representing President Trump. And look, the bottom line is, when you talk about Comey, there's going to be an opportunity for his very aggressive, very skilled defense attorney to file motions to try to peel apart the process and suggest there's something wrong with the process. But what I'm not hearing the critics say is a whole lot about the substance, because there was an Inspector General report that established that Comey leaked things to a special employee, through a special employee, all the time to the New York Times. So I'm really interested to see, how the trial plays out. And last thing on this, Kevin, lawfare was certainly used as a weapon to go after Trump, but it also protected people. And so you can also look at this as, 4 years of love from the Biden administration kept Comey out of the crosshairs, kept Andy McCabe out of the crosshairs, despite being alleged to have lied 5 times. So in some ways, you can say it's tit for tat, or you can say it's just overdue.
It's a very good point. And I think a lot of people are wondering how he did not manage to end up with one of those pardons. But maybe he felt like he didn't want to go down that route. I want to share this. This is James Comer, a man you know very, very well. He basically says, Jim, it's not about tit for tat. This is simple. If you lie and you obfuscate and you break the law, you'll be found out and you'll be prosecuted. Listen to him.
Dr. Fauci's lied to the House Oversight Committee. Hunter Biden lied to the House Oversight Committee. Jim Biden lied to the Oversight Committee. There are criminal referrals there as well. And I think that that Comey is the first step in what many people in America that believe in the Constitution and want to see justice, I believe, is the first step with Comey. And I think there are going to be many more.
I think there are going to be many more. I would be remiss if I didn't get you to weigh in on that, Jim. What do you think? You think this is the first of many?
Yeah, hard to know. I mean, look, I think you have to look at each case, singularly, and not just assume that because you don't like Fauci and that Fauci was dishonest, that he's next. But I think there's a special place for false statement prosecutions when it comes to the FBI director. I mean, you are the chief, law enforcement officer for what was a reputable and powerful institution, one that's been respected around the world for years until Comey politicized it. And so I think that, his stature, so to speak, earns a lot more scrutiny than maybe some, folks that do a drive-by bit of testimony at Congress on some other issue.
I don't want to make it difficult for you to sort of bring in Andy McCabe and other folks out there who also could ultimately face charges. But I think if you look at sort of a wide swath here, I think it's a pretty good chance that this will be the first domino we'll all be watching together. Real quickly, let me ask you about Andy McCarthy. I don't know if you saw his comments. He says, they shouldn't be doing this. Real quickly, your thoughts on another very respected attorney. His opinion differs, I believe, from yours.
Yeah, I mean, I like Andy a lot. I mean, he was the criminal chief in Southern District of New York. He's got a lot of experience, and I respect him. And there's times where we're going to disagree, and I think this is probably one. I mean, mostly I don't prejudge. We haven't, we're sitting here like pronouncing whether it's a righteous case or not, 3 days after an indictment. We have no idea what the motions practice is.
So, ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe. Be here, I would say, about 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We will have another live stream. There's no way that this article in November of 2016 gets the information. And here you have Comey celebrating the leak that he testifies about in 2017. Hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. I will be back later this evening.